Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was a galvanic mechamorph. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The silence in Izuku Midoriya's bedroom was a physical weight. It pressed down on his shoulders, seeped into the colorful All Might posters that wallpapered his life, and turned them into mocking specters of a dream that was now officially dead. Each smiling, triumphant visage of the symbol of peace felt like a personal insult, a brightly colored reminder of the words that had shattered his world on a rooftop just yesterday. "I'm sorry, young man. You can't be a hero without a quirk." The words echoed in the suffocating quiet, a phantom of All Might's somber, pitying tone. Izuku was curled on his chair, his latest hero analysis for the future, number 13, notebook lying open on his desk. The pages were a testament to a lifetime of obsessive passion, detailed sketches of heroes, breakdowns of their quirks, theories on their ultimate moves, weaknesses, and potential team-ups. The ink was slightly smeared on the last page, the one dedicated to All Might himself. A small, dark blotch marked the spot where a tear had fallen. He had replayed the scene 1,000 times. The sludge villain. Bakugo's explosive, terrified eyes. The pro-heroes standing back, unable to act. And his own legs, moving before he could think, a quirkless, useless boy running toward a monster because no one else would. For a single, fleeting moment, he had felt like a hero. Then came the rooftop. The crushing, gentle finality in his idol's voice. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. His hands clenched into fists, knuckles white. It wasn't fair. He wanted it more than anyone. He studied harder, trained his body until his muscles screamed, analyzed every fight he could find. He had the heart of a hero, the mind of one. All he lacked was the one thing you couldn't learn, the one thing you couldn't earn. The one thing that mattered. A fresh wave of despair washed over him, so potent it made his stomach clench. He thought about his mom, how she had cried and apologized to him when he was 4, as if it were her fault. He thought about Bakugo's sneering face, the endless taunts of quirkless Deku. They were all right. He was useless. He pushed back from his desk, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. He couldn't stay here, surrounded by the ghosts of his ambition. He needed air. He needed to do something. Anything. His eyes fell on his computer monitor, paused on a news report from earlier in the week. The headline read, "Dagobah Municipal Beach Park, a monument to illegal dumping." The image showed a once beautiful coastline choked with mountains of scrap metal, broken appliances, and generations of forgotten trash. It was a local disgrace, a problem so big that no one wanted to touch it. Heroes were too busy with villains, and the city council was gridlocked over the cost of cleanup. A strange thought sparked in the darkness of his mind. All Might, in his skeletal form, had told him that if he wanted to help people, he could become a police officer or a doctor. He'd said they were fine professions. Izuku had barely heard him through the roaring in his ears, but now, the sentiment resonated differently. It was about helping. About making a difference. He couldn't fight villains. He couldn't save people from a burning building. But he could move trash. It was a pathetic substitute for his dream, a consolation prize of the highest order. But it was something. It was a physical, tangible problem he could throw himself at until he was too exhausted to think, too sore to feel the ache in his chest. He could take a place that was ugly and broken and piece by piece, make it clean. Maybe, just maybe, that was its own kind of heroism. With a resolve born from the deepest pit of heartbreak, Izuku Midoriya put on his sturdiest pair of sneakers, grabbed a pair of work gloves, and walked out the door, leaving the silent judgment of his All Might collection behind him. The smell hit him first. A pungent medley of rusted metal, briny sea salt, and something vaguely foul decaying under the relentless sun. The Dagobah Municipal Beach Park was less a park and more a metallic mountain range sculpted by decades of apathy. Refrigerators lay half-buried in the sand like ancient tombs, skeletal car chassis were tangled with nets and seaweed, and endless piles of assorted junk formed jagged peaks against the blue sky. The rhythmic crash of waves against the shore was a mournful sound, as if the ocean itself were weeping for what had been done to it. For a moment, the sheer scale of the task threatened to swallow Izuku's fragile resolve whole. It was impossible. He was one scrawny, quirkless teenager. This was a job for 100 heavy-lifting quirks and a fleet of industrial machinery. But then he looked at a small patch of sand near the entrance, a tiny oasis a few square feet in size, somehow spared from the deluge of refuse. It was clean. It was what this whole place was supposed to be, one piece at a time, he muttered to himself, his voice small against the roar of the surf. He grabbed a twisted bicycle frame and began dragging it toward the designated pickup area by the road. It was grueling work. The metal was heavy, its edges sharp. The sun beat down on his neck. Within an hour, he was drenched in sweat, his muscles trembling with exertion. But with every piece of junk he moved, a tiny bit of the crushing weight in his chest seemed to lift. This was real. This was progress. This wasn't dreaming or analyzing, it was doing. He stacked tires. He hauled waterlogged furniture. He filled bag after bag with smaller debris. He worked until his body screamed, and then he kept working. He'd been at it for the better part of a week, establishing a small but noticeable cleared area, when he heard a voice that wasn't his own internal monologue of encouragement. "Whoa! What you're doing is supermanly, dude," Izuku yelped, dropping a heavy car battery he'd been wrestling with. He spun around to see a boy his age with spiky, bright red hair and teeth that looked like they could bite through steel. He was shirtless, wearing only baggy shorts, and his toned physique spoke of constant training. This was Eijiro Kirishima. Izuku recognized him from Aldera Junior High, though they'd never been in the same class. Kirishima had a simple but effective hardening quirk. "I was just, cleaning," Izuku stammered, flustered. Kirishima's grin widened. "Just cleaning? Dude, this is like a legendary quest. I come out here sometimes to train, you know? Punching stuff that won't complain." He gestured to a dented engine block nearby. "But I never thought of actually cleaning it. That's a whole other level of hardcore. Seriously, that's the spirit of a hero right there." Izuku's face burned. The spirit of a hero? He was just a quirkless kid moving trash because his real dream had been declared impossible. "It's nothing, really," he mumbled, looking down at his worn-out gloves. "Nah, don't say that," Kirishima insisted, walking closer. "Taking on a problem everyone else ignores. That's the manliest thing I've seen all week. My name's Eijiro Kirishima." He stuck out a hand. Izuku tentatively shook it. Kirishima's grip was like solid rock. "Izuku Midoriya." Before their conversation could continue, a second voice cut through the air, this one laced with a nervous energy. "Hey, Kiri! You're not gonna believe this, but I think I saw— Whoa, what's going on here?" A boy with a jagged black streak in his blonde hair emerged from behind a mountain of washing machines. He had a lanky build and an easygoing, almost lazy posture. Denki Kaminari, another student from Aldera, known for his electricity quirk and his tendency to short-circuit his own brain when he overused it. "Kaminari! Check this guy out," Kirishima said, clapping Izuku on the back with enough force to make him stumble. "Midoriya here is cleaning the whole beach by himself." Kaminari's eyes widened, taking in the small cleared section and then the colossal mess that remained. "The whole beach? Dude, are you insane? My pals dared me to come find the ghost of the Garbage King and I'm already freaked out." "You're living here?" "I don't live here," Izuku squeaked. "I'm just trying to help." Kaminari looked from Izuku's determined, sweat-streaked face to Kirishima's beaming expression of approval. A slow grin spread across his own face. "Huh. You know, that's actually kinda cool. Way cooler than ghost hunting." He shrugged. "Well, I'm not doing anything else. Got any spare gloves?" Izuku stared at them, dumbfounded. Kirishima was already cracking his knuckles, eyeing a particularly large heap of scrap. Kaminari was rummaging through a discarded duffel bag, presumably for his own work gloves. They weren't laughing at him. They weren't calling him a quirkless wannabe. They were impressed. They wanted to help. For the first time since the rooftop, a genuine, unforced smile touched Izuku's lips. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I have an extra pair." The next few weeks transformed the lonely, Sisyphean task into a shared mission. A bond forged in rust and sweat grew between the three boys. They fell into a natural rhythm, their personalities and quirks creating an unexpectedly efficient team. Kirishima was the powerhouse. He'd use his hardening to shatter brittle plastics, break down large, rusted appliances, or safely handle jagged pieces of metal without getting cut. His endless optimism and cries of "so manly" were the fuel that kept them going when their energy flagged. Kaminari was the utility man. He'd use small, controlled jolts from his fingertips to power down sparking, dangerous electronics or to weld smaller pieces of metal together for easier transport. He was also the comic relief, his jokes and easygoing nature breaking the monotony of the labor. He quickly discovered that while moving trash was hard, doing it with friends was surprisingly fun, and Izuku, to his own surprise, became the strategist. His analytical mind, honed by years of studying heroes, was perfectly suited to this new kind of problem-solving. He would survey a junk pile and immediately see the best way to dismantle it, which pieces were load-bearing, the safest way to create a path, the most efficient way to sort the materials. He was the heart and brain of their little operation. They worked together every day after school. They shared cheap convenience store snacks during their breaks, sitting on a flattened car hood and watching the sunset paint the sky over their slowly expanding patch of clean beach. They talked about their dreams. Kirishima wanted to be a hero who could protect everyone with an unbreakable defense. Kaminari wanted to be a hero too, though he admitted he also thought it would be a cool way to get famous and meet girls. Izuku, for the first time, felt comfortable enough to share his own story. He told them about being quirkless, about the years of bullying, about his unshakable desire to be a hero despite it all. He left out the part about All Might, the wound still too raw to expose. Kirishima listened intently, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a quiet respect. "That's not a weakness, Midoriya," he said, his voice firm. "Wanting to be a hero when you don't have a power, that takes more guts than anything I can think of. That's the manliest thing of all." Kaminari nodded, nudging him with his elbow. "Yeah, man. You're like the team captain. We just smash and zap stuff. You're the one telling us where to point the smashing and zapping." In that moment, surrounded by junk and new friends, Izuku felt a sense of belonging he had never known before. He wasn't quirkless Deku. He was Midoriya. He was their friend. He was the team captain. It was on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon, nearly a month into their project, that everything changed. They had cleared a massive section, revealing parts of the beach that hadn't seen direct sunlight in years. They were tackling one of the oldest and most densely packed mountains of junk, a monolithic pile of industrial waste and discarded machinery. "Okay," Izuku said, wiping sweat from his brow and surveying the metal cliff. "I think if Kirishima can break that central support beam, the big red one, the whole top section should slide down to the left. Kaminari, be ready to short out that old generator if any wires look live." "You got it, Captain." Kaminari gave a mock salute. Kirishima grinned, his fist already hardening to a jagged, rocky texture. "Unbreakable demolition mode, engaged." He reared back and slammed his fist into the rusted I-beam. The structure groaned in protest. He hit it again and again. On the fourth punch, the beam snapped with a deafening screech of tortured metal. As Izuku predicted, the top of the pile began to shift. But it didn't just slide. The sudden redistribution of weight caused a catastrophic collapse. The entire mountain of junk gave way, a tidal wave of steel and iron crashing down towards them. "Look out!" Izuku yelled. Kirishima reacted instantly. He shoved Izuku and Kaminari behind him, activating his hardening across his entire body and bracing for impact. "Unbreakable!" he roared. The avalanche of scrap metal slammed into him with the force of a freight train. He held his ground, a human shield against the deluge, groaning with the immense strain. When the last piece of metal clattered to a stop, the world was silent save for Kirishima's heavy panting. "Is everyone okay?" he grunted, his quirk receding. "Yeah, thanks to you, man," Kaminari said, his voice shaky as he peeked out from behind Kirishima's back. "That was way too close." Izuku was staring, his mind working a mile a minute. The collapse had changed the landscape. It had sheared away the side of the junk mountain, revealing something that didn't belong. Amidst the chaos of twisted, rusted, and irregular shapes was a perfectly flat, dark gray surface. It was smooth, seamless, and completely devoid of rust, despite clearly having been buried for decades. "What is that?" he whispered, walking towards it. "Whoa," Kirishima said, following him. "Looks like part of a ship, maybe? But the metal's all wrong." Izuku ran a gloved hand over the surface. It was cool to the touch, and the alloy felt unnaturally dense. He traced his fingers along it, searching for a seam, a rivet, anything. He found a faint, almost invisible rectangular outline, about the size of a large door. In the center was a recessed, circular depression. "It's a hatch," he breathed, his analyst's brain kicking into overdrive. "This isn't scrap. This was made to last." It was deliberately buried. Kaminari came closer, peering at it nervously. "Dude, what if it's like an old bomb shelter? Or a villain's hideout? Maybe we should just leave it alone." But the curiosity in the air was too thick to ignore. Izuku pressed his palm into the circular depression. Nothing happened. He tried to find a latch, a button, a keypad. There was nothing. It was perfectly smooth. "Maybe it needs a key?" Kirishima guessed, tapping it with a hardened knuckle. The sound that came back was a deep, resonant thud, not the tinny clang of ordinary metal. Izuku's eyes scanned the design. The circle, the seamless edges, it wasn't mechanical. It was electronic. "Kaminari," he said, his voice suddenly sharp with an idea. "Can you give it a small jolt? Right here in the center. Not too much, just enough to maybe wake up a dormant system. You want me to electrocute the mystery doom hatch?" "Okay, sure, why not?" Kaminari said with a nervous laugh. He took a deep breath, and a small, controlled arc of blue-white electricity sparked from his fingertip to the center of the circle. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a soft, green light illuminated the outline of the rectangle. A low hum vibrated through the ground, and with a hiss of decompressed air, the heavy hatch began to retract upwards into a hidden cavity, revealing a dark, square opening and a metal ladder descending into blackness. The three boys stared at each other, their faces a mixture of fear and pure, unadulterated excitement. "No way," Kirishima whispered, his eyes wide. "Okay, now I'm definitely thinking villain's hideout," Kaminari said, though he didn't back away. Izuku's heart was pounding in his chest like a drum. This was the greatest mystery he had ever encountered. His fear was completely overshadowed by his insatiable need to know what this was. "I'm going down," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Before his friends could protest, he swung his legs over the edge and started to climb down the ladder into the unknown. The air grew cooler and smelled of ozone and sterile, dormant machinery as they descended. Kaminari went last, using his quirk to create a small, flickering ball of light in his palm to illuminate the way. The ladder was long, leading them at least 50 feet down into the earth. It ended on a grated metal floor in a vast, dark chamber. When their feet touched the ground, motion sensors kicked in. Soft, ambient green lights hummed to life along the walls and floor, revealing the space around them. They were in a semicircular room, its walls lined with complex-looking consoles and dormant computer screens. But the centerpiece, what took up the entire space before them, made all three of them gasp. It was a cockpit, a massive, armored command center built for three. In the center was a single, heavily padded pilot's chair, flanked by two slightly smaller stations on either side. A huge, wraparound view screen, currently black, dominated the front wall. Below their feet, a thick, transparent plate in the floor offered a view of a colossal, intricate mechanism. A glowing green core pulsed with a slow, steady, sleeping rhythm, like the heart of some leviathan. "What is this?" Kirishima breathed, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "It's the bridge of something," Izuku mumbled, his eyes darting everywhere, trying to absorb every detail. The design wasn't like anything he'd ever seen. It was far more advanced than current hero tech, but it also had a strange, slightly worn, almost retro feel to it. A submarine? A spaceship? Or a giant robot? Kaminari supplied, his voice trembling with a mix of terror and awe. He pointed to a small, faded designation stenciled onto the side of the main console, Mech X4. Izuku felt an irresistible pull towards the central pilot's chair. It was as if the room itself was calling to him. He walked forward slowly, his friends watching in silence, and ran a hand over the cool metal of the armrest. He analyzed the controls, twin joysticks with an array of multifunction buttons, foot pedals, and a complex heads-up display built into a helmet cradle behind the seat. It was impossibly complex, yet somehow intuitive. Familiar. Midoriya, maybe you shouldn't. Kirishima started, a note of caution in his voice, but it was too late. Izuku was already sitting down. The chair was a perfect fit, contouring to his body as if it were molded for him. An inexplicable feeling of rightness washed over him, a sense of coming home to a place he'd never been. Acting on an instinct he didn't know he possessed, he reached out and placed his hands on the two control sticks. The moment his skin made contact, something inside his mind shattered. It wasn't a sound or a light. It was a sensation. A dormant, latent power he never knew existed, a part of his very being that had been asleep his entire life, suddenly roared awake. It felt like a circuit finally completing, a dam breaking. A torrent of raw data, a flood of pure information, poured into his brain. He felt the cold, viscous lubricant in 10,000 joints. He felt the potential energy coiled in the massive actuators of the machine's limbs. He felt the charge in every capacitor, the state of every one of the millions of circuits that made up the colossal machine around them. He could feel its weight, its height, its structural integrity, its dormant weapon systems. He knew, without looking at a single screen, that the primary core was operating at 17% standby power, that the left leg hydraulics were at 98.4% pressure, and that the external hull temperature was 28.3 degrees Celsius. The robot wasn't just a machine he was sitting in. In that instant, it became an extension of his own body. He had a quirk. A powerful one. He was a technopath. As this realization dawned, the cockpit responded. The dormant view screen flickered to life, displaying a cascade of alien-looking characters that he could somehow read perfectly. Consoles beeped, lights flashed, and the entire room hummed with rising power. The green heart beneath their feet began to glow brighter, its steady pulse quickening to match Izuku's own frantic heartbeat. A calm, synthesized female voice, ancient and clear, echoed through the cockpit. Technopath detected. Neural uplink established. Welcome, pilot. Kirishima and Kaminari stared, their jaws hanging open. They saw the change in Izuku. His eyes were wide, glowing with a faint green light that mirrored the core. He wasn't just sitting in the chair anymore. He was connected to it, a part of the magnificent, terrifying machine they had uncovered. Dude, Kaminari whispered, pointing a trembling finger. I think you're its quirk. Izuku didn't hear him. He was too lost in the symphony of data, the feeling of immeasurable power thrumming through his nerves. He flexed his right hand on the control stick, and deep within the machine, he felt a colossal arm, tons of impossibly advanced metal and wiring, mirror the movement. Outside, on the surface of Dagoba Beach, the ground began to tremble. The mountains of junk shifted and groaned. With a sound like the world tearing itself apart, a titanic, armored hand, larger than a city bus, burst free from the scrap, reaching towards the sky. The junkyard giant was waking up. The world outside the cockpit was a silent, black and white movie. Izuku Midoriya could see it on the massive view screen that had just flickered to life, a fisheye lens perspective from a camera mounted on the robot's head, showing the sky, the clouds, and the very tops of the surrounding mountains of junk. But the view was secondary. A footnote to the deluge of sensation pouring directly into his brain. He didn't just see the world, he felt it. He felt the tons of compacted earth and rusted metal pressing against the robot's buried chassis. He felt the gentle sea breeze as a complex pressure differential across the exposed metal of the machine's hand. He felt the thrum of the core beneath his feet not as a vibration, but as a heartbeat that was now his own. His technopathy wasn't a control panel. It was a total immersion symbiosis. He was the ghost in this colossal machine. Midoriya? Dude! What's happening? Kaminari's voice was a high-pitched squeak, yanking Izuku partially back into his own body. He looked over and saw his friends staring at him, their faces pale in the eerie green glow of the cockpit. I don't know, Izuku stammered, his own voice sounding distant. I can feel it. All of it. It's a part of me. He flexed his own fingers, and on the screen, the giant, sky-breaching hand mirrored the motion, its massive digits curling into a fist. The movement was accompanied by a low, grinding groan of ancient machinery that vibrated through their very bones. "This is insane," Kirishima breathed, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. This is beyond manly. This is Titan OY. The sensory input was overwhelming. It was like trying to listen to 1,000 conversations at once. To regain some semblance of control, Izuku focused on a single, simple thought, a command born from a lifetime of dreaming of being a hero: stand up. It was a mistake. He hadn't intended it as a direct order, but the machine, linked intrinsically to his will, obeyed. It didn't ask for clarification. It didn't execute a graceful, pre-programmed sequence. It simply stood. The world outside erupted. The ground convulsed as if struck by an earthquake. With a sound like a glacier calving, the machine began to rise. Tons of scrap metal, cars, and debris that had served as its tomb for decades were thrown hundreds of feet into the air. The cockpit, their entire world, tilted violently, pinning them to their seats with a crushing G-force. "Whoa!" Kaminari screamed, grabbing onto his console for dear life. "Brace yourselves!" Kirishima yelled, his body tensing instinctively. Izuku felt a wave of vertigo so profound it almost made him black out. He wasn't just being lifted. He was feeling the strain in every single hydraulic piston in the robot's legs. He felt the scraping of metal against its shins, the shifting weight distribution as its center of gravity rose higher and higher. The machine staggered, its colossal foot smashing down onto the beach with a cataclysmic boom that sent shockwaves rippling across the sand. Finally, after an agonizingly clumsy lurch, it was upright. The Mech X4 stood tall for the first time in what felt like an eternity. It was a giant forged of dark, weathered metal, its frame blocky and powerful, built for function over form. Its silhouette was heroic, with broad shoulders and a powerful torso, but it was scarred and pitted from its long slumber. Faint green lines of energy pulsed through its armor, all originating from the glowing core in its chest, visible even from the outside. Standing at its full height, it towered over the landscape, casting a shadow that stretched far out over the ocean. The sun glinted off its head, a silent, armored god rising from a junkyard tomb. Inside the cockpit, the trio was breathless. We're alive," Kaminari panted, his knuckles white where he gripped the console. "Did you do that, Midoriya?" Kirishima asked, his voice full of wonder. I think so," Izuku replied, his mind reeling. He tried to take a step, focusing his intent, and the robot responded with another ground-shaking, clumsy stomp. It was like a toddler learning to walk, if the toddler weighed 100,000 tons and could level a city block by falling over. He was a brain in a new body, and he had no idea how the muscles worked. It was then that a new sensation filtered through his link with the machine. It wasn't part of the robot's internal diagnostics. It was an external signal, a powerful electromagnetic surge from about 2 miles away, inland. It was chaotic, a spike of energy that felt like a scream in the EM spectrum. On the view screen, a new window popped up, automatically zooming in on the source of the disturbance. The image was grainy but clear enough. A construction site. And in the middle of it, something was going very, very wrong. Kamui Woods was having a very bad day. He'd responded to a routine alert, a public disturbance at the Takora Seaside construction zone. He'd expected a petty thief or maybe a low-level villain with a weak-stomached construction quirk. He had not expected this. A Scarab Class 7 demolition unit, a 6-legged, heavily armored machine the size of a house, was on a rampage. Its single, glowing red optical sensor swiveled menacingly as it smashed through scaffolding with its massive hydraulic claws. Its safety protocols were clearly offline. Its IFF, Identify Friend or Foe, system was shot. It was treating everything, buildings, vehicles, people, as demolition targets. Lacquered chain prison! Kamui yelled, launching his arms forward. Branches of wood shot out, wrapping around one of the scarab's legs. For a moment they held. Then, with a screech of protesting metal, the bot simply tore its leg free, splintering Kamui's wood like toothpicks. "It's no good!" yelled the hero Death Arms from behind a makeshift barricade of concrete blocks. My fist can't even dent that armor. The scarab turned its attention to them, its main weapon, a high-intensity plasma cutter designed for slicing through reinforced steel, beginning to glow with a malevolent orange light. The construction workers and civilians screamed, scrambling for cover. The pro-heroes were outmatched. This wasn't a villain they could punch or restrain. It was a mindless, unstoppable force of industrial destruction. Suddenly, a sound unlike any other echoed from the direction of the coast. It wasn't an explosion or a sonic boom. It was a single, earth-shattering thump, followed by another. It sounded like a god was walking towards them. Everyone, heroes, civilians, and even the rogue scarab bot, froze, turning towards the source of the noise. Cresting the hill between the city and the beach was a silhouette that defied all logic. A metal giant, impossibly huge, was striding towards them, each step shaking the very foundations of the city. The sun gleamed off its dark, ancient armor, and a single, cyclopean green eye on its head glowed with an unnerving intensity. Kamui Woods could only stare, his jaw agape. What, in the world, is that? It's heading for the city, Izuku yelled, his voice cracking with panic. He was fighting the controls, trying to make the mech run, but its movements were still clumsy and chaotic. That energy surge when we powered up, it must have overloaded its systems. This is our fault. The weight of responsibility crashed down on him. This was exactly what heroes dealt with, a sudden crisis, people in danger, and a threat that needed to be stopped. But he wasn't a hero. He was a quirkless kid, no, a technopath kid, who had just woken up an ancient weapon he had no idea how to control. We have to stop it, Kirishima declared, his fear being rapidly replaced by a fiery determination. There are people down there. Stop it? We can barely walk, Kaminari shrieked, pointing at the view screen. And it's got a giant laser thing. We're gonna get melted inside our mystery robot can. As if on cue, the scarab bot identified the approaching Mech X4 as the primary threat. Its plasma cutter fired, launching a searing beam of orange energy straight at them. The beam moved incredibly fast. Izuku's mind screamed, but his newfound body was too slow, too clumsy to dodge. He braced for the impact, for the feeling of superheated plasma melting through the armor that was now his skin. No! Kirishima roared. Instinct, pure and simple, took over. He wasn't thinking about the console in front of him. He was thinking about protecting his friends, about being an unbreakable shield. He slammed both of his hands down flat on the dormant panel before him. Defend! His quirk flared, his own skin momentarily taking on its hardened, rock-like texture. A sympathetic surge of energy flowed from him into the console. The panel lit up like a Christmas tree, characters and diagrams flashing across its surface. A schematic of Mech X4 appeared, with a bubble of hexagonal patterns expanding from its chest. In the real world, a shimmering, translucent green shield, composed of interlocking hexagonal energy plates, materialized in front of the mech just nanoseconds before the plasma beam hit. The beam struck the shield with a deafening crackle hiss. The energy barrier flickered violently, and the cockpit shuddered from the force of the impact, but it held. The plasma dissipated harmlessly across its surface. Izuku stared at the shield on his view screen, then at Kirishima, who was panting, his hands still pressed against the now glowing console. Kirishima, you did that? I think so? Kirishima said, looking at his hands and then back at the console, which now displayed readouts for energy shield, 88% strength and structural integrity. I didn't want us to get hit. It just happened. The machine was responding to them. To their instincts. To their quirks. Okay, that's awesome. Kaminari yelled, a spark of manic energy in his eyes. So if Mr. Unbreakable is our shield, what am I? He looked down at the dark console in front of him. It was the only one still dormant. He tentatively placed his hands on it. Nothing happened. Huh. Guess I'm the comic relief, he muttered, disappointed. Get ready! Izuku grunted, forcing the mech to take another heavy step forward. It's firing again. The scarab unleashed another plasma blast. Kirishima, now, on it! Shield up! Kirishima slammed the console again, and the hexagonal barrier sprang to life, deflecting the attack once more. The strain was visible on his face. He was clearly linked to the shield's integrity in some way. "We can't just keep blocking," Izuku said, his mind racing. He could see the scarab's schematics in a data window on his HUD, analyzing its weaknesses. Its main weapon has a recharge cycle of 6 seconds. We need to hit it during that window. Its primary optic sensor is its weak point. He tried to aim the mech's right arm, to throw a punch, but the movement was agonizingly slow. He was a puppeteer with tangled strings. "I can't get a clean shot," he grunted in frustration. "Let me try something," Kaminari yelled, his fear now morphing into a desperate need to contribute. He looked at his console, at the array of unlabeled buttons and switches. One large, tempting red button sat under a protective cover. In a moment of pure, unadulterated panic and curiosity, he flipped the cover up. "What does this do?" he wondered aloud, pressing the button. A surge of energy coursed through his station. A low, powerful hum filled the cockpit, a sound of immense power charging. On the mech's right shoulder, a previously hidden panel slid open, revealing a multi-barreled weapon pod. Green energy coalesced in the barrels with a high-pitched whine. "Oh," Kaminari said. "Kaminari, what did you do?" Izuku yelled, seeing a dozen new warning lights flash on his display. "I don't know. It's making a scary noise." The targeting system, now active, automatically locked onto the largest nearby threat, the Scarab bot. A targeting reticle on the main view screen turned from yellow to red, centering perfectly on the bot's optical sensor. "Target lock acquired," the synthesized voice announced calmly. Kaminari, in his panic, fumbled with a joystick on his console, and his finger accidentally slipped onto a trigger button. Fwum! 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 3 bolts of brilliant green plasma, each the size of a small car, erupted from the shoulder cannon. They tore through the air with incredible speed, leaving shimmering trails of energy in their wake. The first bolt struck the scarab dead center in its red eye, shattering the armored lens. The second and third bolts slammed into its torso, punching clean through its chassis and blowing out the other side in a shower of sparks and molten metal. The scarab bot seized up, its legs twitching. Its plasma cutter sputtered and died. With a final, pathetic groan of dying hydraulics, the massive machine collapsed, crashing to the ground in a heap of smoking, ruined steel. Silence descended. The heroes and civilians on the ground stared, utterly speechless, at the giant robot that had just saved them, its shoulder cannon still smoking slightly. Inside the cockpit, the 3 boys were frozen in a state of shock. Kaminari slowly lifted his trembling finger from the trigger. He looked at his console, which was now fully illuminated, displaying readouts for plasma cannons, laser arrays, and main energy conduit. I did that," he whispered, a slow, disbelieving grin spreading across his face. "On the attack. On the freaking attack. You almost gave me a heart attack," Kirishima yelled, a breathless laugh escaping him. "But that was so manly." Izuku slumped back in his pilot's chair, the flood of sensory data receding slightly as the immediate threat vanished. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, terror, relief, exhilaration. They had done it. They had faced a real threat, worked together, and won. It was a clumsy, chaotic, panicked mess, but it was a victory. For a fleeting moment, he felt the pure, undiluted joy of being a hero. The feeling was shattered by the sound of sirens. In the distance, a fleet of police cars and what looked like hero agency vehicles were speeding toward their location. Pro-heroes, he could see Empty Lady in her giant form and Best Jeanist in the distance, were converging on the scene. The reality of their situation came crashing back down. They were 3 unlicensed teenagers in command of an unregistered, city-destroying sized weapon of unknown origin. They were in so much trouble. "We have to go," Izuku said, his voice urgent. "Now. Before they see us." "Go where?" Kaminari asked, his celebratory mood evaporating. "We're in a 100-foot-tall robot. We're not exactly sneaky. Back to the beach. Back to the hole," Izuku commanded, his mind already formulating a plan. "We have to hide it. Kirishima, keep an eye on your console, be ready for anything. Kaminari, see if you can power down those glowing bits on the outside. We need to go dark." He gripped the controls, this time with more purpose. The connection to the mech felt a little less chaotic, a little more intuitive now that the adrenaline of battle had sharpened his focus. He turned the giant robot around, its huge feet leaving craters in the asphalt, and began the slow, heavy trek back to the coast. The pro-heroes arrived at the construction site to a scene of confusion. The rogue demolition bot was neutralized, smoking in a heap. The area was littered with gigantic footprints, each one a mystery that defied easy explanation. What happened here? Empty Lady asked, shrinking down to her normal size. Kamui Woods pointed a wooden finger towards the hill. Something big. It saved us. And then it just walked away. Death Arms knelt, examining the edge of one of the footprints. The pressure marks are incredible. The weight must be astronomical. This isn't a gigantification quirk. This was a machine. They all looked at each other, a deep sense of unease settling over them. A weapon of this magnitude, appearing out of nowhere and vanishing just as quickly, wasn't a heroic debut. It was a terrifying unknown. Getting Mech X4 back into its subterranean hangar was even more stressful than the fight. Every step sent a tremor through the ground that Izuku was sure could be felt for miles. He guided it back to the massive hole they had created, his movements still shaky but more deliberate now. Okay, easy, easy, he muttered to himself, instructing the mech to kneel. With a groan of stressed metal, the giant lowered itself into the pit. They landed with a soft thud, back in the darkness of their discovery. Kaminari, can you close the hatch? Izuku asked, his body trembling with post-adrenaline fatigue. Kaminari, after a few frantic moments of button mashing on his console, found the right command. Got it. On the surface, the seamless metal hatch slid back into place. Kirishima then had a brilliant idea. Midoriya, can you use the hand to cover it up? Good thinking. Izuku focused, manipulating the robot's arm, which was still outside. He carefully scooped up piles of junk and debris, artfully arranging them over the hatch until it was once again buried beneath a mountain of scrap, looking just as it had before their world had been turned upside down. Finally, he retracted the arm back into a hidden recess below ground. Silence. They were safe. They were hidden. Izuku powered down the main systems. The cockpit lights dimmed, the view screen went black, and the powerful hum of the core faded back to its slow, sleeping pulse. The three of them sat there in the quiet dark, the only light coming from the soft green glow beneath the floor. The shared reality of what they had just done washed over them. They hadn't just found a robot. They had piloted it. They had fought a monster and won. They had saved people, and they had a secret big enough to shake the foundations of their society. After what felt like an eternity, Kaminari broke the silence. So, that happened. Kirishima let out a long, shaky breath. My heart is still trying to beat its way out of my chest. Izuku finally let go of the control sticks. The sudden disconnection from the machine left him feeling strangely empty and small. He was just Izuku Midoriya again, a scrawny teenager sitting in a dusty chair. But something had fundamentally changed. The despair that had haunted him for weeks was gone, replaced by a terrifying, exhilarating sense of purpose. They climbed the ladder back to the surface, emerging into the late afternoon sun. The air smelled of salt and ozone. They were covered in grime, their clothes were torn, and they were utterly exhausted. They scrambled behind a tall pile of flattened cars, peering through a gap to watch the pro-heroes and police investigating the distant construction site. They looked at each other. Kirishima, the steadfast shield. Kaminari, the explosive, unpredictable cannon. And Izuku, the quiet, analytical boy who had just discovered he was the heart of a giant of steel. No one can know about this, Izuku said, his voice low and serious, cementing the thought that was in all their minds. Not our parents, not our teachers. No one. Agreed, Kirishima said with a solemn nod. They wouldn't understand. They'd take it away. They'd study it, lock it up. And we'd be in juvie for life for Grand Theft Robot and operating heavy machinery without a license, Kaminari added, a nervous tremor in his voice. But we saved those people, right? We were heroes. The word hung in the air between them. Heroes. It was all Izuku had ever wanted to be. He had stumbled into it in the most impossible way imaginable. He now had the power to be a hero, a power far beyond anything he had ever dreamed of. But it was a power that came with a terrible, wonderful, and earth-shatteringly large secret. He looked at his two friends, at the shared look of fear and wonder in their eyes, and knew that his life, their lives, would never be the same. The path to his dream had just appeared before him, but it was not a path he could walk alone. The following days were a fever dream of paranoia and whispered conversations. Every news report was a potential landmine, every passing police car a source of heart-stopping anxiety. The Hosa Giant incident, as the media had dubbed it, was the biggest mystery in Japan. News helicopters circled the coastline for days, their cameras scanning the Dagoba Beach Park, searching for any sign of the colossal machine that had appeared and vanished like a ghost. Pundits and experts on TV debated its origins, a secret government project, a new type of villain, or even an extraterrestrial visitor. Not a single one of them guessed the truth, that the giant was being piloted by 3 high school-aged boys from a hidden hangar buried under a mountain of trash. For Izuku, Kirishima, and Kaminari, the world had been split into 2 distinct realities. The first was their normal, mundane life, attending classes at Aldera Junior High, dealing with homework, and feigning ignorance whenever the Hosa Giant was brought up in conversation. The second, more visceral reality began the moment the school bell rang. It was a life of secrecy, of sneaking off to their junkyard sanctuary, of descending a metal ladder into the heart of a machine that could change the world. They made a pact, a solemn oath sworn in the green glow of the dormant cockpit. First, absolute secrecy. No one could ever know. Second, they had to understand what they had found. They needed to learn, to train, to master the incredible power at their fingertips. Third, and most importantly, they would use this power for good. The thrill of saving those people, of making a real difference, had ignited a fire in all 3 of them. They weren't just kids with a secret toy, they were a team. Their afternoons at the beach transformed. The cleanup project, once their primary goal, became a convenient cover story. While they still moved junk around, mostly to further camouflage the mech's hangar, their true work began underground. Izuku was in his element. The despair that had hollowed him out was replaced by an insatiable, analytical fervor. His hero analysis for the future notebooks found a new, singular purpose. He stopped sketching heroes and started sketching schematics. The cockpit became his library. His technopathy gave him a unique advantage. When he was linked with the mech, he could access fragmented data logs, diagnostic reports, and technical readouts. Most of it was corrupted or in a strange, ancient dialect of code, but he painstakingly translated what he could, filling page after page with his spidery handwriting. He documented everything: the mech's official designation, Mech X4, confirming Kaminari's discovery, its estimated height, 50 meters, roughly 164 feet, and its power source, a self-sustaining telluric core that seemed to draw ambient energy from the planet itself. He mapped out the complex web of systems, theorizing on their functions. He was no longer just the pilot. He was the machine's biographer, its chief scholar. He was the heart of the operation, the central processing unit that directed the others. Kirishima embraced his role as the defense. His console, he discovered, controlled more than just the main energy shield. He learned to project smaller, localized barriers, to reinforce specific sections of the mech's armor, and to manage the complex flow of energy from the core to the defensive systems. His training became a test of endurance. He would have Izuku execute stressful maneuvers, sharp turns, sudden drops, while he struggled to maintain the structural integrity fields, his own stamina directly linked to the machine's resilience. He would stand for hours in the cockpit, his hand on the console, learning to feel the mech's state of being like a second skin, anticipating stress fractures before the system alarms even blared. Kaminari, as the attack, had the most explosive and dangerous job. His weapons console was an arsenal of terrifying potential. He quickly learned that the plasma cannons he had accidentally fired were just the beginning. There were laser arrays, missile pods, currently empty, much to his disappointment, and a sonic stunner. His biggest challenge was modulation. Firing at full power, as he had in the fight, was easy, but learning to fire a small, precise, non-lethal plasma burst to, say, knock a tire off a stack of junk without vaporizing the entire pile, was incredibly difficult. He spent hours in simulations that Izuku managed to activate, practicing his aim and, more importantly, his restraint. He was the team's sword, and he had to learn the difference between a surgical strike and a devastating slash. Their synergy grew with every session. Izuku would call out a combat scenario. Okay, a villain is attacking from the left flank, high-speed projectile incoming. Kirishima would instinctively raise a shield on the left side, angling it to deflect the imaginary blow. Opening for a counterattack, 3-second window. Izuku would continue. Kaminari would have the plasma cannon charged and ready, firing a simulated blast the moment the shield dropped. They were becoming a cohesive unit, their actions flowing together, a three-part mind in a single, colossal body. It was during one of these late-evening training sessions, about a month after their first battle, that their secret world was breached. They were practicing a rocket punch, a maneuver Izuku had found in a fragmented combat log. It involved channeling a massive amount of kinetic energy into the mech's forearm and launching it forward on a piston-like system for a devastating melee strike. Okay, routing auxiliary power to the right arm actuator, Izuku narrated, his brow furrowed in concentration. The link was active. He could feel the energy building. Kirishima, I need you to reinforce the shoulder joint. The kickback is going to be massive. Reinforcement field at 120%. Kirishima grunted, his muscles tense as if he were physically holding the giant's shoulder in place. Kaminari, give me a small energy burst into the kinetic charger on my mark. Mark. Zapping it now, Captain. Kaminari sent a controlled jolt through his console. Izuku felt the final component click into place. He gripped his control stick and thrust his own arm forward. Rocket. Punch. Outside, the Mech X4, standing in a large clearing they had made in the center of the beach, mirrored the movement. Its right arm shot forward with incredible speed, a sonic boom cracking the air as it broke the sound barrier. The colossal fist, as big as a house, slammed into a designated mountain of compacted car frames with an impact that felt like a localized earthquake. The mountain simply ceased to exist, replaced by a cloud of pulverized metal dust. Whoa! Yeah! Kaminari and Kirishima cheered in unison. Incredible, Izuku breathed, analyzing the data. The kinetic force was even higher than I calculated. He was so absorbed in the readings that he didn't notice the new variable at first. A small, almost insignificant life sign on the periphery of the mech's sensors, standing near the entrance to the park. The figure was thin, almost skeletal, and was staring directly at them. A cold dread washed over Izuku. Someone's here, he whispered, his voice tight. Someone's watching us. On the view screen, he zoomed in. The image resolved into a gaunt, emaciated man with sunken eyes and wild, blonde hair. He was leaning heavily on a railing, looking less like a threat and more like a gentle breeze could knock him over. But there was an intensity in his gaze that was unmistakable. And then, to Izuku's absolute horror, the man coughed, a racking, painful sound, and a puff of steam erupted from his mouth. It was All Might. Toshinori Yagi felt a guilt that was as heavy and persistent as his chronic injury. Every day since that conversation on the rooftop, he had thought of the green-haired boy with the fire in his eyes. He had done what he thought was right, what was responsible. He had delivered a hard, painful truth to prevent the boy from getting himself killed. But the memory of the light dying in Izuku Midoriya's eyes haunted him. He had been discreetly keeping an eye on the boy. He was relieved, and frankly astonished, to see the kid's response to his crushed dream wasn't to give up, but to channel his heroic spirit into a seemingly impossible community service project. Cleaning the entire Dagoba beach? Alone? The sheer, stubborn determination of it was heroic. It was the kind of spirit Toshinori himself had once possessed. He started visiting the beach in his weaker form, keeping his distance, just to check in. He told himself it was to ensure the boy was safe. In truth, he was drawn to that indomitable spirit. It was a flickering candle in the encroaching darkness of his own waning power. Then came the Hosu giant incident. Toshinori, like the rest of the world, was baffled. But when the reports mentioned that the giant had appeared from the direction of the coast, a cold, impossible suspicion began to form in the back of his mind. It was absurd. It was illogical. But the timing, the location, it was too much of a coincidence. So tonight, he had come to watch. He'd hidden himself, waiting, observing the quiet, junk-strewn beach. And then the ground had trembled. A machine of impossible scale had risen from the earth, silent and majestic in the twilight. He had watched, utterly mesmerized, as it executed a training maneuver with a display of power that could have leveled a city block. He knew. He didn't know how, but he knew. The boy he had told was worthless without a quirk was somehow at the heart of this impossible miracle. He watched as the giant robot gracefully knelt, disappearing back into its hidden lair. A few minutes later, 3 figures emerged from a camouflaged hatch. Izuku Midoriya, Eijiro Kirishima, Denki Kaminari, 3 boys from the same junior high, looking guilty, exhilarated, and terrified all at once. Toshinori stepped out from the shadows of the park entrance, his heart heavy. The secret was out. And he was the one who had found it. The confrontation was tense and silent. The 3 boys froze, their faces draining of all color as they saw the skeletal figure of All Might standing before them. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't booming with heroic laughter. He just looked tired, sad, and impossibly old. Young Midoriya, he said, his voice a low rumble. It seems we have a great deal to discuss. There was no point in denying it. They led him down the ladder into the cockpit, the air thick with the unspoken fear of what was to come. Was he going to arrest them? Confiscate the mech? Tell their parents? All Might, Toshinori, surveyed the cockpit with a weary, analytical eye. He ran a thin finger over a console, looked up at the massive view screen, and peered down at the gently pulsing core. He was silent for a long time, the only sound the soft hum of the dormant machine. Finally, he sat down heavily on a maintenance crate, the weight of the world seemingly on his shoulders. He looked at Izuku, his blue eyes searching the boy's face. I told you that you couldn't be a hero without a quirk, he began, his voice laced with regret. I was wrong. It appears you had one all along. A very powerful, very unique one. Izuku flinched. I didn't know. I swear. Not until we found this place. It just woke up when I touched the controls. Toshinori nodded slowly. I believe you. He then looked at Kirishima and Kaminari. And you too, you are a part of this? You pilot it with him? Yes, sir, Kirishima said, standing ramrod straight as if reporting to a commanding officer. I handle the defenses. Kaminari controls the weapons. We're a team, Kaminari added, his usual cheekiness replaced by a nervous respect. Toshinori looked between the 3 of them, the earnest strategist, the stalwart defender, the volatile attacker. He saw not just 3 kids with a powerful machine, but the nascent form of a perfectly balanced hero unit. The potential was staggering. The danger was even greater. Do you have any idea what this is? Toshinori asked, gesturing to the cockpit around them. Where it came from? We think it's called Mech X4, Izuku offered, holding up one of his notebooks. The data logs are mostly corrupted, but it seems to be old. Very old. The technology is advanced, but not in a way that matches anything from the last few decades. It was buried here deliberately, powered down in a low-energy stasis mode. Toshinori's expression grew grim. A relic from the past. A weapon of immense power, hidden away. He looked at Izuku. A weapon that is key to your specific quirk. This is no accident, my boy. You and this machine are connected by more than just chance. He stood up and began to pace, the full implication of the situation crashing down on him. His original plan, to find a worthy vessel for one for all, had been his sole focus for years. He had looked at young Midoriya and seen a worthy heart trapped in a quirkless body. He had made a judgment call, a painful one, and turned him away. But the world had provided another path. A different, stranger, and perhaps even more powerful one. The boy's heroism hadn't been extinguished, it had simply found a different conduit. A 160-foot-tall, city-saving conduit. I came here tonight to confront you, Toshinori admitted, his voice softening. To scold you for your recklessness. To secure this thing for the authorities. That was my duty as a hero. The boys braced themselves, their faces falling. But he continued, a new light entering his eyes. I also saw what you did. I saw the news reports from Hosu. You saved dozens of lives. You acted when the pro-heroes were outmatched. Your methods were chaotic, unsanctioned, and incredibly dangerous, but your hearts were in the right place. You acted like true heroes. He stopped pacing and looked directly at Izuku, a profound choice solidifying in his mind. He couldn't offer the boy his quirk now, not when he had one of his own that was so deeply intertwined with this incredible destiny. To give him one for all would be to complicate, perhaps even corrupt, this strange new power, but he could offer something else. Something just as valuable. I cannot give you my power, young Midoriya, he said, his voice firm with a newfound resolve. But I can give you my knowledge. My experience. I can teach you what it means to be a hero, not just to have power, but to wield it with wisdom, restraint, and courage. Izuku's eyes widened, tears welling up. What are you saying? I am saying that I will be your mentor, All Might declared, a spark of his old, heroic fire returning to his voice. I will be all of your mentor. I will train you. I will advise you, and I will use every ounce of my influence to keep this machine a secret, to protect you while you learn. The world is not ready for Mech X4. And you are not yet ready to reveal it. Relief washed over the three boys so powerfully it almost brought them to their knees. Kirishima and Kaminari grinned at each other, a silent explosion of joy passing between them. Izuku was openly crying now, silent tears of vindication and gratitude streaming down his face. His idol hadn't come to punish him, he had come to guide him. But make no mistake, All Might said, his tone turning deadly serious, cutting through their celebration. This will be the hardest training of your lives. You are not just learning to be heroes, you are learning to be a single, cohesive hero unit in command of a weapon that could be perceived as a threat to national security. You will be held to a higher standard than any other student. You will have to be stronger, smarter, and more disciplined than everyone else. He looked them each in the eye. So, I will ask you now. What is your goal? What do you want to do with this power? Izuku wiped his tears, his expression hardening with a determination that impressed even the number one hero. He looked at his friends, who nodded in unison, their thoughts aligned. We want to get into UA High, Izuku said, his voice clear and steady. We want to get into the hero course and become officially licensed heroes. As a team, a slow, genuine smile spread across Toshinori Yagi's face. It wasn't the beaming, camera-ready smile of All Might. It was the proud, heartfelt smile of a teacher who had just found his most promising students. UA, he mused, a thoughtful look in his eyes. That presents a significant logistical challenge. But the principal of UA is an old friend, and he is far more intelligent than I. If anyone can find a way to make this work, it is him. Very well. That is our new mission. He clapped his hands together, his energy renewed. Your training begins tomorrow. First lesson, discretion. From now on, you do not activate this machine without my express permission unless it is a life or death emergency. We will establish protocols, communication methods, and a rigorous training schedule. You will learn tactics, hero law, and most importantly, teamwork under pressure. He looked at the cockpit, at the three boys standing before him, their faces illuminated by the glow of the machine's heart. He saw the future. It was not the future he had planned, not the legacy he had intended to leave. It was something wilder, stranger, and infinitely more complex. But for the first time in a long time, Toshinori Yagi felt a genuine, unshakable sense of hope. The next generation of heroes was here. And they were going to be giants. The next 10 months were a blur of relentless, grueling, and utterly transformative work. Izuku, Kirishima, and Kaminari's lives became a carefully compartmentalized whirlwind of activity, a balancing act that pushed them to their absolute limits. By day, they were model students at Aldera Junior High, their heads buried in textbooks, preparing for the academic rigors of UA High's written entrance exam. By evening, their real education began. Under the watchful eye of All Might, the Dagoba Beach Park became their private training ground. The cleanup project was completed in record time, a testament to their teamwork and the occasional, discreet use of the mech for heavy lifting. The once disgraced coastline was now pristine, its sands clean and its waters clear, their first, tangible victory as a team. But the real work happened underground, in the humming cockpit of Mech X4. All Might was a surprisingly harsh, yet effective, mentor. He drilled them relentlessly, not just in the mech's operation, but in the core tenets of heroism. They ran tactical simulations Izuku managed to piece together from the mech's damaged data logs. All Might would throw crisis scenarios at them, forcing Izuku to make split-second command decisions, Kirishima to manage dwindling shield power against overwhelming odds, and Kaminari to choose between a powerful attack that could cause collateral damage and a weaker, safer shot. A hero's greatest weapon isn't their quirk, it's their judgment. All Might would lecture, his voice echoing in the cockpit. Power without wisdom is just destruction. What are the civilians in the area? What is the structural integrity of that building you're using for cover? What is your exit strategy? Think. Always think. Beyond the mech, he trained their bodies and their individual quirks. He put them through a brutal physical conditioning regimen he called his American Dream Plan, which left them aching and exhausted every single day. He sparred with Kirishima, teaching him how to use his hardening not just for defense but for offense, finding the balance between mobility and invulnerability. He worked with Kaminari on controlling his electrical output, increasing his resistance to his own quirk's backlash, pushing him to think of his power as a versatile tool, not just a one-shot blast. And he worked tirelessly with Izuku. While the boy's primary power was linked to the mech, All Might discovered that Izuku's technopathy was growing. With intense focus, he could now subtly influence simple electronics from a distance. He could cause a phone to flicker, a digital watch to reset, or a vending machine to drop a free soda. It wasn't flashy, but it was a tool. All Might taught him hand-to-hand combat, honing his reflexes and analytical mind into a fighting style that focused on predicting and redirecting an opponent's moves. "You are the heart of the team, young Midoriya," All Might told him one evening, as they sat on the clean sand watching the sunset. "But a heart cannot be a liability when it is outside the body. You must be able to stand on your own. Every hero must." The day of the UA entrance exam arrived like a thunderclap. The written portion was, as they had prepared for, challenging but manageable. Their long nights studying paid off, and they left the testing hall feeling confident, their minds buzzing with nervous energy for the trial that truly mattered, the practical exam. As they stood in the massive crowd of examinees before the presentation stage, the sheer scale of their ambition hit them. They were surrounded by hundreds of other hopefuls, each one buzzing with a unique and powerful quirk. There were kids with engine legs, kids with exploding sweat, kids with tentacles and laser eyes, and then there were the three of them. Kirishima cracked his hardened knuckles. Kaminari nervously ran a hand through his hair, tiny sparks dancing at his fingertips. Izuku clutched the straps of his backpack, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. Their plan, carefully crafted with all might, was fraught with risk. "You cannot bring a 160-foot robot to the practical exam," All Might had stated, the understatement of the century. "The goal is for you three to pass on your own merits. Prove that you are heroes, not just pilots. Score what points you can, but if a true crisis emerges, one that threatens the lives of the other students, then the rules change." Hidden in Izuku's pocket was a small, unassuming device that looked like a garage door opener. It was a beacon, reverse-engineered by Izuku from the mech systems, and shielded by All Might's support connections to be untraceable. A single press would send a coded, hypersonic signal to Mech X4, overriding its stasis mode and summoning it to their location. It was their ace in the hole, a last resort they all prayed they wouldn't have to use. President Mick's booming voice explained the rules, a 10-minute mock battle in a massive cityscape replica, where they would fight against an army of robotic villains, each worth a different point value. 1-pointers were small and agile, 2-pointers were medium-sized and better armed, and 3-pointers were large, armored behemoths. Izuku found himself in Battle Center B, the same testing ground as a bubbly, round-faced girl and a serious-looking boy with engines in his calves. He was separated from Kirishima and Kaminari, who were in other battle centers. This was it. He was on his own. The moment the massive gates opened, the other examinees shot forward in a blur of motion. The boy with engine legs was gone in a flash. The girl touched the ground and a moment later was floating gracefully over the rooftops. Izuku was left standing in the dust, a stark reminder of his physical limitations. "Okay, Deku," he muttered to himself, his old, hated nicknames surfacing in his moment of self-doubt. Don't panic. Analyze. Adapt. He ran into the city, his eyes scanning for opportunities. He saw a one-pointer rolling down an alley. It was fast, but its optical sensor was exposed. Focusing his will, Izuku reached out with his fledgling technopathy. He didn't have the raw power to shut it down, but he could create a momentary glitch. The robot's sensor flickered, its targeting system stuttering for a split second. That was all the opening he needed. He darted in, using a crowbar he'd picked up to pry open a maintenance panel and rip out a handful of wires. The robot sparked and collapsed. 1 point. It was a slow, grueling process. He couldn't go head-to-head with the robots like the other examinees. He had to be smarter. He used his power to short out traffic lights, causing them to crash into each other. He lured a group of two-pointers into a narrow street, and then overloaded a nearby power conduit, frying their systems. He was earning points, but not many. Through the city-wide speaker system, he could hear President Mike giving a running commentary. 7 minutes had passed, and the top scorers already had 40 or 50 points. Izuku had 6. It wasn't going to be enough. In their respective battle centers, Kirishima and Kaminari were faring much better. Kirishima was a crimson wrecking ball, his hardening allowing him to smash through robots with joyful, boisterous cries of unbreakable. He was racking up points with sheer, indomitable force. Kaminari was equally effective, though less precise. He unleashed a wide-area discharge of electricity, shorting out a dozen robots at once. He was leaning against the wall, his brain temporarily fried into a state of blissful idiocy with his thumbs up, but he had scored an impressive number of points in a single blast. They were proving they could hold their own. Izuku, however, was starting to despair. He had managed to scrape together a few more points, bringing his total to 9, but time was running out. The other students were avoiding him, seeing him as a quirkless weakling who was just getting in the way. He could feel the dreams slipping through his fingers. It was then that the ground began to shake. Not the gentle tremble of a training exercise, but a deep, violent, bone-jarring quake. A shadow fell over the entire battle center, so vast it blotted out the sun. And now for our main event. President Mick's voice boomed, but there was a new, genuine note of fear in it. The obstacle that will really test your mettle. The zero-pointer. From behind a skyscraper, it rose. A robot of truly epic proportions, bigger than any building in the cityscape. Its treaded base tore up the asphalt as it moved, its massive arms capable of leveling entire blocks with a single swipe. The other students, who had been fighting so fiercely moments before, turned and ran, their faces masks of terror. It's not worth any points. It's just a gimmick. Run away! One of them screamed. Izuku was about to do just that when he heard a cry for help. It was the nice, bubbly girl from the entrance. Achiko Uraraka. She had tripped and fallen, and her leg was now pinned under a huge slab of concrete, a piece of collateral damage from the zero-pointer's rampage. The colossal robot was bearing down on her, its huge, metallic hand raised to smash the very spot where she was trapped. Something inside Izuku snapped. He saw her terrified eyes, the way she struggled helplessly. He saw the other examinees running away, saving themselves. He saw the pro-heroes in the observation tower, too far away to intervene in time. He saw a person in danger, and no one was helping. In that instant, his point total, the exam, UA, all of it became meaningless. The only thing that mattered was saving her. His legs were moving before his brain could issue the command, a phantom echo of the day he had run towards the sludge villain. But this was different. He wasn't quirkless anymore. He wasn't helpless. He looked at the zero-pointer, a machine of immense power and complexity. He could feel its systems, a chaotic storm of energy that was far too powerful for his weak technopathy to influence directly. He couldn't stop it on his own, but he wasn't on his own. He was the heart of a team. He reached into his pocket, and his thumb pressed down hard on the beacon. He didn't yell. He didn't make a grand declaration. He just sent a single, desperate thought out into the world, a call to arms for his partners. We have to call it. In Battle Center A, Kirishima was in the middle of smashing a three-pointer when he felt the ground shake. He saw the zero-pointer rise in the distance over the walls of his own arena. Whoa, that thing is huge! He exclaimed. A moment later, a high-frequency buzz tickled his ear, a signal from a small receiver All Might had given him. It was the summons. Midoriya was in trouble. Real trouble. In Battle Center C, Kaminari was just recovering from his brain fry when the same tremor hit. The beacon in his pocket vibrated, confirming the signal. Showtime, he muttered, a grin spreading across his face as his mind cleared. Without a moment's hesitation, they both broke off their engagements. Ignoring the confused shouts of the other examinees, they sprinted towards the towering walls that separated the battle centers. I don't have time for the door, Kirishima yelled to no one in particular. He activated his quirk, his body turning to jagged rock, and slammed himself headfirst into the reinforced concrete wall. With a deafening crack, the wall fractured. He hit it again, and again, creating a man-sized hole through which he scrambled, leaving a trail of debris in his wake. Kaminari, seeing Kirishima's direct approach, opted for something with a bit more finesse. He placed both hands on the massive electronic gate that separated his zone from Battle Center B. Open sesame, he yelled, pouring a massive, controlled surge of electricity into the gate's locking mechanism. Sparks flew, circuits fried, and with a groan of protest, the multi-ton gate slid open. They converged on the scene just as a sound like a thunderclap ripped through the sky. In the Yui observation tower, the mood had shifted from academic assessment to genuine alarm. What is the meaning of this? A small, mouse-like creature in a suit demanded, his beady eyes fixed on the monitor showing the zero-pointer. This was Principal Nizu, the hyper-intelligent head of UA High. That is not our standard zero-point model. Its power output is off the charts. It's not acting like a programmed obstacle. It's acting like a genuine threat. We're trying to shut it down, sir. A panicked technician replied, his fingers flying across a keyboard. But it's not responding. The external controls are completely fried. Something is overriding our systems. Aizawa Shoyuda, the hero known as Eraserhead, narrowed his eyes. It's a deliberate attack, he said, his voice a low growl. Someone has hijacked our exam. It was then that every sensor on their monitors blared red. Sir! Unidentified object entering the airspace above Battle Center B at hypersonic speed. Another technician yelled. It's huge! And it's coming down fast. On the main screen they saw it. A colossal object, wreathed in the fire of atmospheric re-entry, plummeting from the heavens. It was a machine. A giant armored robot, and it was heading straight for their exam site. The teachers and pro-heroes could only watch in stunned silence. The world seemed to hold its breath. Izuku stood his ground, a lone figure before the towering zero-pointer, his defiance a seemingly futile gesture. The trapped girl, Achiko, stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. Get out of here! She yelled. You'll be killed. Izuku didn't answer. He just kept his eyes locked on the sky. He had faith in his team. He had faith in their machine. The sky tore open. With a deafening sonic boom that shattered every window in the mock city, Mech X4 landed. It didn't crash. It executed a perfect, three-point superhero landing, its massive feet cratering the street, and its right fist planted firmly on the ground. The impact sent a shockwave of wind and dust blasting through the city, kicking up cars like they were children's toys. It rose to its full, majestic height, its dark armor gleaming in the sun, its single green eye glowing with heroic purpose. It was positioned perfectly between the out-of-control zero-pointer and the trapped girl, a guardian giant appearing from the heavens. The sight was so awesome, so utterly reality-breaking, that every single person, examinees, teachers, Principal Nizu, even the rogue zero-pointer, froze. No way, a random examinee whispered from a rooftop, his jaw hanging open. From the hole in the wall, Kirishima emerged, a determined grin on his face. From the now open gate, Kaminari sauntered out, crackling with energy. They both ran towards the kneeling giant. Let's do this, Kirishima said, slapping Kaminari on the back. Time to make some noise, Kaminari replied, his fear completely gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated hype. Small panels opened on the mech's legs, deploying grappling lines that snagged the two boys, rocketing them upwards towards the cockpit hatch on the robot's back. A moment later, Izuku did the same, a line snagging his belt and pulling him up with breathtaking speed. They landed inside the familiar, humming space of the bridge. Izuku scrambled into the pilot's seat, the world flooding his senses as the neural link established. The feeling was no longer overwhelming. It was comfortable, familiar. It was home. Neural uplink established, the synthesized voice announced. Welcome back, pilot. Kirishima, status. Izuku barked, his voice now filled with the authority of a seasoned commander. Defense systems green. Shields at 100%. Kirishima responded, his hands flying over his console. Kaminari, weapons. All charged up and ready to party, Captain. Kaminari yelled, flipping the safety covers off his main triggers. On the main view screen, the zero-pointer, recovering from its shock, began to move again. It registered Mech X4 as its new primary target. Its massive arm swung, a clumsy but devastatingly powerful blow aimed at the mech's head. Shields! Izuku commanded. Kirishima threw up a hexagonal energy barrier just in time. The zero-pointer's fist slammed into it with a deafening clang of metal on energy. The shield held, but the force of the impact sent a shudder through the entire mech. It's strong! Kirishima grunted, the feedback rattling his teeth. This thing is way tougher than that construction bot. In the observation tower, the teachers were losing their minds. What is that thing? President Mike screeched, his voice cracking. 3 of the examinees just boarded it. A technician confirmed. Midoriya, Kirishima, and Kaminari. They're piloting it. Mizu stared, his intelligent eyes wide with a look that was part terror, part unadulterated glee. Fascinating, he whispered. Truly fascinating. Back in the cockpit, Izuku's mind was racing. He could see the zero-pointer's internal workings. Its armor was thick, but its joints were a weak point, and its power source, a volatile experimental core in its chest, was poorly shielded. But this wasn't just a machine. He could sense a ghost in this machine, too, a faint, malevolent wisp of code that was directing it. This was a Noma. A prototype, biomechanical kaiju Noma. This isn't one of UA's bots, Izuku said, his voice grim. It's a villain. Kaminari, target its right shoulder joint. A disabling shot, not a kill shot. You got it. Firing a love tap. Kaminari aimed and fired a single, precise plasma bolt. The shot hit the zero-pointer's shoulder, a joint the size of a car. Armor plating buckled and hydraulics ruptured, causing the robot's arm to slump uselessly at its side. The kaiju Noma roared in frustration, a screech of twisted metal and synthetic rage. It compensated by firing a barrage of missiles from hidden pods in its chest. Kirishima, evasive maneuvers and point defense. Izuku yelled, pushing the mech into a surprisingly agile sidestep, its movements far more fluid than in their first battle. Kirishima activated a series of smaller, targeted shields, intercepting each missile in a flurry of green-hued explosions that lit up the battlefield. Missiles neutralized, but that's all my shield has for the next few seconds. It's recharging. We need to end this now, before it can cause any more damage, Izuku said. He saw his opening. The missile barrage had left the Noma's chest plating temporarily exposed. He knew what he had to do. We're going in for a melee strike. Full power to the legs and right arm. Kaminari, divert all non-essential power to the kinetic chargers. Kirishima, reinforce the entire right side of the chassis. It's time for our ultimate move. You heard the man. Kirishima yelled, his console glowing as he focused all defensive energy into the mech's arm and torso. Juicing you up. Kaminari shouted, rerouting the weapon's power into the physical systems. Izuku could feel the immense power building, a sun of kinetic energy coalescing in the mech's fist. He pushed the controls forward, and Mech X4 charged. It closed the distance in 3 ground-shaking strides, its metal feet tearing up the street. Rocket! Izuku, Kirishima, and Kaminari screamed in perfect, rehearsed unison, their voices echoing in the cockpit, their wills united as one. Punch! The mech's right arm shot forward. It wasn't just a punch, it was a piston of righteous fury, propelled by plasma and heroic intent. The fist connected with the kaiju Noma's chest with an impact that was not so much a sound as a physical event. For a moment, all noise ceased. Then, A web of cracks spread out from the point of impact across the Noma's torso. A blinding white light erupted from within as its core went critical. With a final, silent scream, the zero-pointer, the Kaiju Noma, detonated in a massive, upward-venting explosion that reached for the heavens. Mech X4 stood tall amidst the smoke and fire, its fist still extended, a silent, victorious titan. The battle was over. The exam was over. Izuku's first action was not to celebrate. He expertly manipulated the mech's free hand, its massive, gentle fingers carefully lifting the slab of concrete off Ochiko Uraraka. He then gave a soft, almost imperceptible thumbs up with the colossal hand before retracting it. The timer buzzed, signaling the end of the exam. Silence fell over Battle Center B, broken only by the crackling of fires and the awestruck whispers of the other examinees. In the observation tower, no one spoke for a full 10 seconds. Then, Principal Nizu started to clap, a slow, deliberate sound that cut through the tension. "Well," he said, a wide, slightly terrifying grin spreading across his face. "I believe we have found our new star pupils." He turned to a stunned Aizawa. "Shoyuta, I do hope you've cleared your schedule. It appears you're going to have some very unique students to look after." The silence in Principal Nizu's office was a curious thing. It wasn't empty or awkward, it was a thinking silence, filled with the gentle clinking of a porcelain teacup and the almost imperceptible hum of the high-tech server racks lining one wall. Izuku Midoriya sat on a plush sofa that was far too comfortable for the situation, wedged between a stoic Eijiro Kirishima and a visibly vibrating Genki Kaminari. They hadn't said a word in 10 minutes, ever since they had been escorted from a post-exam holding area directly to the principal's office at the top of UA's main tower. The being before them, a small, white, creature of indeterminate species, took a slow, deliberate sip of his tea. His black, beady eyes, gleaming with an intelligence that was both brilliant and vaguely unsettling, scanned the file on his desk. It was a thin file, containing only their names and the single, explosive event that had defined their entrance exam. "An anomaly," Nizu said at last, his voice a polite, cheerful tenor that did nothing to ease the tension in the room. He placed his teacup down with a soft click. "That is the word my staff has been using. A hostile, external entity of unknown origin, a biomechanical weapon, hijacked our zero-point obstacle. It threatened the lives of dozens of prospective students, a catastrophic failure of our security systems." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And then, he continued, a tiny smile playing on his snout, came the second anomaly. One that, quite frankly, makes the first one seem rather dull by comparison. He folded his paws neatly on his desk and looked at them. It felt like being analyzed by a supercomputer. Mech X4, he said, the name sounding perfectly natural in his mouth. A 50-meter-tall, unregistered, weaponized automaton of unknown design and origin, piloted by 3 young men who, until yesterday, were not on any hero registry, government watch list, or, indeed, any radar whatsoever. You did not just bend the rules of our entrance exam, boys. You vaporized them, buried the ashes, and built a monument in their place. Kaminari swallowed hard, a sound that was unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Kirishima's jaw was set so tight it looked like it was carved from granite. Izuku felt a cold sweat trickling down his back. This was it. The end of the road. Your actions were reckless, unsanctioned, and a violation of at least a dozen different national and international laws regarding quirk usage and unlicensed combat, Nizu stated calmly. Then, his smile widened, showing a hint of sharp teeth. They were also, without a doubt, the single most effective and heroic response to a crisis I have had the pleasure of witnessing in my entire career. A side door to the office opened, and Toshinori Yagi entered, looking gaunt and weary in a simple tracksuit. He offered the boys a small, reassuring nod before turning to the principal. Nizu, he said, his voice a low rumble. Thank you for seeing them. Toshinori, Nizu greeted him warmly. Your recommendation, while unorthodox, has proven to be quite the spectacle. I assume you can vouch for these young men and their very large quirk? I can, All Might's civilian form confirmed. He looked at the boys. I have been overseeing their training for the past 10 months. Their decision to activate the mech was their own, a direct response to a lethal threat. It was the correct one. Nizu's gaze returned to Izuku. You saved every student in that arena, Mr. Midoriya. Not just the girl trapped under the rubble, but all of them. Our simulations indicate that had you not intervened, the Kaijinoma would have resulted in catastrophic casualties before the pro-heroes on site could have contained it. For that, Yui is in your debt. He tapped a button on his desk, and a large monitor on the wall flickered to life, displaying the final exam scores. Most students had scores ranging from 20 to 70. A blonde boy with an explosion quirk, Katsuki Bakugo, was at the top with 77 villain points and 0 rescue points. Below him, the scores varied. Then, at the very top of the list, were 3 names. 1. Midoriya, Izuku villain points, 9/rescue points, 100. 2. Kirishima, Aijiro villain points, 39/rescue points, 60. 3. Kaminari, Denki villain points, 42/rescue points, 60. Izuku stared at the screen, his mind unable to process the numbers. 100 rescue points? Rescue points are awarded by a panel of judges for acts of selfless heroism, Nizu explained, noticing his confusion. Saving a fellow examinee is worth a significant amount. Saving the entire exam from a catastrophic, villain-sent threat, well, that breaks the scale. You 3 have not just passed. You have set a new record. Welcome to Yue High. The relief was so profound, so absolute, that Izuku felt his legs go weak. Kirishima let out a shaky breath, a wide, incredulous grin finally breaking through his stony expression. Kaminari just slumped in his seat, looking like a puppet with its strings cut. No way, he whispered. No freaking way. However, Nizu said, his tone bringing them immediately back to attention. This creates a unique, administrative challenge. He steepled his paws. We cannot very well have a student bringing a skyscraper-sized mech to class every day. And yet, for Mr. Midoriya, it is the core of his quirk. For Mr. Kirishima and Mr. Kaminari, it is a symbiotic extension of theirs. To separate you from the machine would be to hobble your potential as a hero unit. A fascinating conundrum. He took another sip of tea. Therefore, I have created a special provision. Class 1A, for the first time in its history, will have 21 students. However, for all practical team-based exercises and field training, Izuku Midoriya, Aijiro Kirishima, and Denki Kaminari will be registered as a single hero entity, Team Mech X4. You will be graded as a unit and are expected to operate as one. For individual assessments, you will be judged on your own merits. Is that understood? Yes, sir. They all replied in unison, their voices filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Excellent, Nizu chirped. Now, as for your other problem, parking. The parking solution was less a garage and more a monument to Nizu's influence and Yue's obscene budget. Constructed with astonishing speed over the next few days, it was a massive, semi-subterranean structure built into the hillside behind Yue's development studios. It was officially designated the Hero X Annex. When the trio was first led inside, they were speechless. The main chamber was a cavernous space, large enough to house Mech X4 with room to spare. A complex web of gantries, cranes, and scaffolding already lined the walls, and the air smelled of welding fumes and high-grade lubricant. Banks of computers and diagnostic equipment were being installed, all connected to a central observation deck. It was a professional, military-grade hangar, and it was all for them. Standing on the observation deck, a man in a helmet that looked like an excavator's scoop and a pair of oversized goggles turned to greet them. His eyes were wide with a manic, almost religious fervor. So you're the kids? He boomed, his voice echoing in the vast space. Higuri Maijima. But you can call me Power Loader. I'm the head of the development studio, and I've been assigned as your chief engineer. When the principal told me what we were housing, I thought I'd died and gone to Valhalla. He practically vibrated with excitement, gesturing wildly at the mech, which stood dormant in the center of the hangar. The alloy on this thing is impossible. It's lighter and stronger than anything I've ever seen. And the power source? A self-sustaining telluric core? It breaks 6 different laws of thermodynamics. And the neural uplink, a direct psionic interface keyed to a specific quirk factor? It's the holy grail of human-machine interface. I haven't slept in 3 days just running preliminary scans. It's the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." His enthusiasm was infectious. The boys, who had been nervous about handing their secret over to a stranger, found themselves instantly warming to the pro-hero. He didn't see a weapon, he saw a masterpiece. "It's an honor to meet you, sir," Izuku said, bowing respectfully. "We're still learning how it all works." "Nonsense, my boy." Power Loader clapped him on the shoulder. "You're its heart. I'm just the mechanic who gets to keep the body in peak condition. We're going to have so much fun with this." He cackled with glee, already pointing out stress points on the mech's leg that needed reinforcement after the battle. They had found another ally, a vital one, in their strange new journey. The first day of class was a surreal experience. Finding their way to the ridiculously oversized door of Class 1A was an adventure in itself. When they entered, the room was already buzzing with the energy of 20 of the most promising hero candidates in the country. Izuku immediately recognized the serious boy with glasses from the exam, Tenya Ida, and the bubbly girl he had saved, Achiko Uraraka. And then he saw him. Katsuki Bakugo. He was leaning back in his chair, his feet kicked up on the desk, an arrogant sneer fixed on his face. His crimson eyes met Izuku's, and for a moment, they just stared. There was no recognition of their shared past, just the silent, dismissive glare that said, "What are you doing here?" Their homeroom teacher arrived in a yellow sleeping bag, introduced himself as Shota Aizawa in a monotone voice, and told them all to get into their gym uniforms and meet him outside. It was all so sudden, so strange, that no one had time to properly process the fact that there were 21 students in the room, not the standard 20. It was on the training field that the first real crack appeared in their carefully constructed new reality. A quirk apprehension test? The class murmured collectively. Aizawa's tired eyes scanned the faces of his new students. "You've all been taking standardized tests your whole lives. Today, we're finding out your baseline potential." He tossed a softball to Bakugo. "Bakugo, you got the top score in the practical exam. How far could you throw this in middle school?" 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. "Try it now with your quirk." Bakugo grinned, a feral, predatory expression. He wound up, and with a thunderous die, he launched the ball with a massive explosion. It soared into the sky, a tiny speck against the blue. Aizawa held up a device showing the score, 705.2 meters. The class erupted in excitement. "This looks fun!" someone yelled. Aizawa's hair began to float, his eyes glowing a menacing red. "Fun?" he said, a cold edge to his voice that silenced the entire class. "You think being a hero is fun? You have 3 years to become heroes. You don't have time for fun." His lips twisted into a grim smile. "Whoever comes in last place in this test will be judged as having no potential and will be expelled immediately." Panic swept through the students. Izuku felt a familiar dread pool in his stomach. A physical test. Without the mech, he was at the bottom of the pack. "Now," Aizawa said, his gaze sweeping over the students and landing on the 3 of them. "Let's address the administrative anomaly." He looked at the clipboard in his hand. "We have 21 students. Midoriya, Kirishima, Kaminari. Step forward." They did, standing together before their teacher and the curious eyes of their new classmates. "The 3 of you have been admitted under a special provision," Aizawa stated flatly. "For the purposes of this class, you are considered a single hero entity when operating together. It's my understanding that you share a quirk." He paused, then added with a deadpan expression, a very large one. A ripple of confusion went through the class. "Share a quirk?" someone whispered. It was Bakugo who finally broke. He had been watching Deku with a simmering mixture of confusion and rage since he'd seen him walk into the classroom. The useless, quirkless Deku, who he had tormented his entire life, was here. In UA. It didn't make sense. And now this? Sharing a quirk? Hiding something? The dam of his anger finally burst. "DKU!" he roared, startling everyone. He stomped forward, his palms crackling with small explosions. "What the hell is he talking about? You're quirkless. A worthless pebble on the side of the road. How did you get here? What did you do?" Before Izuku could even stammer a response, Kirishima stepped in front of him, His arms crossed, his own quirk flaring to life as his skin hardened. Back off, he said, his voice low and firm. He earned his place here, same as you. Yeah, man, cool your jets, Kaminari added, a lazy grin on his face that didn't quite hide the warning sparks dancing on his shoulders. Bakugo, Aizawa said, his voice dangerously quiet. His scarf began to float around him. Sit down. Now. Another outburst like that, and you'll be expelled before the test even starts. Bakugo froze, his furious red eyes darting from Izuku's determined face to Aizawa's glowing stare. With a guttural snarl, he backed down, but the look he gave Izuku was one of pure, venomous promise. This isn't over. Later, during a short break between tests, Uraraka and Ida approached them. Wow! I knew it was you three, Uraraka said, her face beaming. I saw you from the ground. That giant robot was amazing. Thank you so much for saving me. I'm Achiko Uraraka. Indeed, Ida added, chopping his arm in a stiff, formal gesture. Your intervention was unconventional, but you neutralized the threat and prevented further injury. A truly heroic act. I am Tenya Ida. It is a pleasure to be in the same class as you. It's nice to meet you both, Izuku said, a small, genuine smile on his face. It was a relief to have someone look at them with admiration instead of confusion or hostility. Todoroki Shoto watched them from a distance. He had observed the entire exchange with cold, analytical detachment. Midoriya, the boy who seemed quirkless, was somehow the center of this new power. All Might had been at the exam, and he was now a teacher here. He had likely sponsored them. To Todoroki, the giant robot was not a machine. It was just another overwhelming quirk, another pawn in the grand chess game of heroes he was determined to win on his own terms. It was just another power he would have to surpass. The tests continued, and as Izuku feared, he was performing poorly. His 50-meter dash was average. His grip strength was pathetic. He was coming in last or near last in every event. The threat of expulsion loomed over him like a guillotine. Finally, it was his turn for the ball throw. He stood in the circle, the soft ball feeling heavy and alien in his hand. All eyes were on him. He could feel Bakugo's glare, Aizawa's calculating stare, and the worried looks from Kirishima and Kaminari. Midoriya, Aizawa said, his voice flat and bored, but his eyes were sharp, probing. I've reviewed your file. Your quirk is technopathy, which allows you a neural link to a specific external apparatus, an apparatus that is currently miles away in a secure hangar. He took a step closer. Your power is the robot. So tell me, what good are you without it? The question hung in the air, a direct challenge to his very worth. The entire class was silent, waiting for his answer. Bakugo smirked, expecting him to crumble. The old Izuku would have. He would have stammered, panicked, and failed. But 10 months of training under All Might, of leading a team, of feeling the power of a giant at his command had forged something new inside him. He was still nervous, still scared, but underneath it all, there was a core of steel. He was the heart of Mech X4. A heart could not be a liability. He looked Aizawa straight in the eye. A hero uses whatever tools they have to get the job done, he said, his voice quiet but steady. My quirk isn't the robot, sir. It's the connection, and I am never truly disconnected. Aizawa raised an eyebrow, a flicker of interest in his tired eyes. Prove it. Izuku took a deep breath. He couldn't throw the ball with brute force. So he would use his brain. He reached out with his mind, his technopathy a delicate, invisible touch. It wasn't powerful enough to affect the complex systems of the ball-throwing machine, but he didn't need it to. He scanned the area, his analytical gaze taking in every detail. He noticed one of UA's small, automated maintenance drones making its rounds, sweeping the edge of the field. An idea sparked. It was a risk. His control over independent systems was still shaky. But he had to try. He focused his will, not as a command, but as a request. A packet of data sent on a wireless frequency only he could perceive. Target designation, softball. Objective, altitude maximization. Execute. He tossed the ball lightly into the air, a pathetic, underhanded throw that barely went 10 feet up. A few students snickered. Bakugo let out a harsh laugh. Then, the maintenance drone, which had been sweeping quietly in the background, zipped forward with impossible speed. Its small manipulator arm extended, catching the softball at the apex of its weak arc. Without pausing, the drone's thrusters flared to maximum, and it shot straight up into the sky like a rocket. It went higher and higher, a silver speck against the blue, until it was completely lost from view. The entire class was dead silent, their jaws collectively on the floor. Aizawa stared, a slow, almost imperceptible smirk touching his lips. It was a logical ruse. The kid hadn't broken any rules. He'd simply used his quirk to command a piece of nearby technology to complete the task. It was resourceful, clever, and completely unexpected. A moment later, Aizawa's device beeped. He looked down at the screen, and the smirk widened into a faint grin. He held it up for the class to see. The screen displayed a single, blinking symbol, infinity. Infinity, Aizawa said, a note of grudging respect in his voice. Not bad, kid. To add a final flourish, Izuku focused his technopathy one last time. The massive digital scoreboard at the end of the field, which had been displaying everyone's results, suddenly flickered. The scores vanished, replaced by a live, green-tinted diagnostic screen of a giant robot. In bold letters at the top, it read, Mech X4 Systems, all nominal. Team status, ready. The message was clear. Izuku Midoriya was not just a pilot. He was the central nervous system of a team. And even when he was by himself, his power, his real power, was always with him. He had proven his worth. The expulsion was a lie, a logical deception to push them to their limits. As the day ended, Izuku, Kirishima, and Kaminari stood with their new friends, Iraraka and Ida, looking out over the UA campus. They had a long, difficult road ahead. They had a furious rival in Bakugo, a silent challenger in Todoroki, and a teacher who would push them beyond their breaking point. But they were here. They were students of Class 1A. They were a team, and their giant was waiting for them in its new home. The journey had just begun.